Hello. Normally I release a video every Friday afternoon, but this week that all went a bit wrong because I'd bitten off more than I could chew in the amount of time I'd given myself. I'm not going to tell you what it is I'm working on over there, so I'd let you to try and guess. But no, we do just about have time to feature something different. You know, I've been doing a lot with these bicycle exercise bike controllers for our local gym, and I've been replacing buttons on them. So I'd replaced that top button previously, and now I need to replace the bottom button. And oh, fine, I can do that. But the gym has said that they're having a problem that they're getting through too many batteries. This is expensive. So we thought, could we come up with a solution to replace the batteries? And I've come up with something, but I don't know if this is going to work. So let's investigate. Right, our difficulty is that we want to make these rechargeable somehow. How could I make this into a rechargeable unit? Because they're just getting through far too many batteries. So we've bought a couple of these rather unusual things. They are supposed to be C-size batteries with built-in USB-C charging capability. But if we were going to charge them in situ, then those USB ports would have to be electrically isolated from the terminals. Otherwise, we create a short circuit. Let's just see if the user manual gives us any information on this. Charging. There's no mention of whether they are isolated in that information. So, we're still unsure. Could we safely charge both of these at the same time? Well, it's designed so that you can charge them both at the same time, but can we do so while they're connected to this? And of course, one terminal from one battery is connected to the terminal of the other. So how can I test that? Well, I think what I might do initially is just see what happens in terms of voltage between those terminals. Well, let's just do a measurement now. But it's not just voltage, it's whether there's any current behind it. You know, there might be a residual voltage which is neither here nor there. But is there any electrical connection between these two now that we can measure? And if there isn't, then I could put these on charge and do a current test between these two via a resistor that would make sure that we're not doing anything dangerous. So we're in mega ohms reading mode now. So I want to know, do we measure anything between these terminals? We might measure a voltage. Let's have a look. Dead short. A dead short between that positive and that negative. Or is it because we're measuring a voltage and it's confusing a multimeter? I mean, dead short seems unlikely. Okay, let's switch it to continuity mode. That would be cataclysmic. So why is it not mentioned in the user manual that you must not charge them in situ? This is not as obvious as it seems. I'm very, very wary of what happens if that terminal touches any of the batteries. There's no information here on the isolation or otherwise. Let's try charging them and then see if we have a current flow between one positive and the other negative. This and that, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. I can't get my head around what possible combinations there could be here that could go wrong. We really don't want anything to catch fire. So maybe I should set up something like a 1K resistor between these and measure the current between them whilst they're on charge. Okay, so I need to organise. That's a very short cable there. Let's find a longer USB cable and plug it into a charger. Okay, keeping these away from each other. This is mains from isolation transformer. just because that's what's to hand. So we plug that in and both start charging. That's so far so good. Now let's set up a 1K resistor and current test between those. Okay, so I've now got us set up with a 1K resistor. So for every milliamp we see here, that's equivalent to a volt. Well, let's just see what happens, shall we? So if I connect that to the positive, let's see if any current flows into the next negative. It seems a very random number, either I'm getting a very bad connection or there's something weird happening. Yeah, it's very unstable, but it seems to be about 1 milliamp, which would imply that we've got a definite voltage difference there. What about the other way round? Well, 1.5 milliamps, which says that we've got 1.5 volts between those points. So that would make it unsafe to charge in situ as it stands. Is that right? Yeah, there's 1.5 volts. And the other way around, it's going to be the same, isn't it? 1.5 volts. So what's going on probably is that the negative terminal here is connected to the negative terminal of the battery. Let's see if we can try to prove that. Yes. Yes, so the negative terminal on the USB is connected to the negative terminal of the battery. So charging them in circuit will not work as it stands. This leads us to a couple of possible solutions. It had been my hope that if we put these two batteries in here, that I could set up a USB port. There is already a USB port for different reasons. A USB port on the top of the unit, which would feed these two USB-C sockets on the batteries, and then we could charge it. But that's not going to work. I could fit two USB ports and have them connected to different chargers. Maybe. It is possible to buy USB isolators. Maybe we could use one of those on one of the batteries, which would isolate it from the other. And there's probably enough room in here to fit that. It's still going to be quite tight with all the cabling and stuff, but maybe that's the way forward. The other thing I wanted to check is what the voltage is. And it says here 1.5 volts. So, and that seems to be right, even though these have not really been charged yet. So hopefully these units will work happily from these batteries. They won't complain that, it's only 1.2 volts and it's not enough. Yeah, fine. I just need to go ahead and change these buttons. All right, so they work, but what we don't want is for the users to have to keep taking the batteries out and charging them separately. That's just going to be a pain. I mean, there's no advantage if you're doing that of this type of battery rather than ones that don't have integral ports and just stuff them into a great big battery charger type thing. No, we're looking for a solution we can plug in. So, yep, I think our next move is to see if we can get one of those galvanic isolators. Well, having done some research, USB isolators are not intended for charging for the most part. So that's not really a good solution. A better way might be to use a 3.6 volt 2650 type battery in there. 3.6 volts, I could then put a 1N4001 or similar diode here to drop 0.6 of a volt or so. So that would give us the right voltage, and we'd only have one USB terminal, and we could bring that out here somewhere. So that sounds like a perfect solution, except those rechargeable, USB-C rechargeable 2650 batteries are sort of £25 to £35 each. So I'm not sure the maths is going to make sense that way. Unfortunately, this solution didn't work out and we can't really use it. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed what we've done here today. I will get back to doing my normal videos on audio and video equipment shortly. Bye for now. I've had a very busy week running these tapes. Looks like a U-matic videotape, and it kind of is, but it's actually a PCM digital audio recording. This one is PCM 1630, and it's played on a machine called a DMR 4000. The format actually goes back to about 1978, and the parameters, the capability of this format was what set the recording standards and the bit rate and depth, or the sample rate and depth of CD, and is still therefore used in modern digital audio recordings, and the music that you download is still based on the capability of this kind of tape. And it turned out that I wasn't doing it right, that there's a subtle difference between what will happen if the machine is allowed to record in pure NTSC, which would give a sample rate of 44.056 kilohertz, compared to the sample rate which is required for CD of 44.1 kilohertz. And if you don't have a synchronization cable between the decoder, the PCM 1630 decoder, back to the synchronization input signal of the U-matic DMR 4000 player to control its capstan servo, it will run at subtly the wrong speed if you've got 44.1 kilohertz sample rate on your tapes, and errors will creep in. They sort of add up to a point it can't hold them anymore, and then every 2 or so seconds you get a tiny amount of errors introduced as a result of not having that synchronization cable. But the user manual is not abundantly clear, as it should be, exactly where that cable needs to go, and that it's really important. So it's been a bit of a learning week this week. If you are running any of these DMR 4000 PCM 1630 combinations, they're pretty rare today, not many people have got them, then ask me for more details about that synchronization cable. My system also is connected to a converter that then converts from the obscure SDIF2 digital format that the PCM 1630 creates to more modern Toslink or AES-EBU SDIF digital connections that you can record on modern digital audio recorders. And I've got 2 complete systems, 2 1630s, 2 DMR 4000s, and 2 of the, well, actually the sample rate converters that do that SDIF2 to modern digital audio formats. I've got 2 entire systems all fully working in my studio, and they're pretty rare pieces of kit, so I'm quite proud of owning those.